Matthew Bell from Alzheimer'sProof.com. Today I am in the kitchen of the house that my dad used to live in, and what I was going to talk through today is just a few of the dangers that can be present in the kitchen. In a future video, what I will attempt to do is show how some of these can be resolved, but I just wanted to kind of sketch the lay of the land a little bit. So the first thing, and we're in a kitchen, so you can kind of think of this, I've made comparisons on the website before to childproofing, and there's a lot of similarities. So for example, over here, of course, we have the coffee pot, we've got the stovetop, and any of these are heating devices that can result in burns, they can result in electrocution. The coffee pot is glass, the decanter is glass, of course, and that can be a hazard. My dad one time took a glass pot, basically, and put it on the stovetop, and the heat shattered the glass, just because, again, the cognitive impairment obviously affects judgment. Now here you can see kind of a mess. You've got spices. The microwave can pose a problem. In another video, again, I will discuss ways in which the microwave can be locked. There are some microwaves that have the ability to be locked with a code so that they cannot be operated. In the corner, you can see the outlet. Outlets should be covered. There's also a really great, here we have, again, the toaster, the can opener, which has a blade, it's electrical, crock pot. In another video, I'm going to go over one of my all-time favorite devices, very cheap to get and very easy to use. It is a lock that goes onto the end of electrical plugs, and boy, it is a lifesaver, because you can literally go through the kitchen appliances and not having to remove them. You could simply lock the plugs to make them inoperable. Now, in some cases, for example, with the glass decanter for the coffee pot, there still may be a danger with the glass, even if you can secure it from being plugged in. With the can opener, there could be a danger with the blade, even if you can prevent your loved one from plugging it in and operating it, but at least the danger would be reduced. Or again, in the microwave, there's a glass surface, basically the spinning turntable is glass, and it can be a hazard as well. The garbage disposal, you may want to have. Now here, this is one you have to be careful about, because you don't want to have debris, flushed into the sink. Grease, my dad would do down the sink as well. Now another possible hazard, you can see the floor, very usual kitchen linoleum. There can be a slip hazard if it gets wet. You can also see a kind of a cruddy mat. Now the problem with these is that they can be tripped. My dad would scuff his feet. Shuffle along as he walked, because as he aged, besides the Alzheimer's, he was also having difficulties with his mobility. And so rugs of that kind, or in fact, if you can kind of see, the threshold with the little brass strip, those can be tripping hazards. Now, not really sure, you might be able to just have some kind of a handyman come in and replace the threshold, maybe with one that is a more gradual slope to it. Possibly that could help. But again, we will talk through some solutions. Here's a couple of other things, just the refrigerator and the freezer, being able to get in. A loved one who has Alzheimer's disease could drink expired milk, could break eggs, could get into meat, for example. My dad, left alone, might, for instance, mess with a package of meat, not properly wash his hands. That could be a danger not just to himself, but to other people in the house if, for instance, he were to contaminate some other container with raw meat. Even just sort of touching the packaging or handling it, if you don't observe proper hygiene, and then let's say he gets into the cereal box, you might have some contaminants enter into cereal that everybody eats, or he might just leave the milk uncapped, or just little things. So access control is an extremely important and one of the key elements to being able to keep a person with Alzheimer's disease safe and help with their care. A couple of other things. Obviously, we have along the other wall here, if you can see, it is the outlet. You can see the outlet. There is no ground fault on that particular outlet, no ground fault circuit interrupter, and that can be a problem. And especially here, you can see there is an electrical outlet, and if I remove just the strip there, you can see there's no ground fault circuit interrupter. So this house was built before that would have been a requirement. However, being in close proximity to the sink, to the water, that can be an electrocution hazard, and so you might want to have an electrician or handyman, or if you feel comfortable doing it yourself, to upgrade the electrical outlet. A couple of other things, you might have a cabinet that has various cutlery, eating ware. Could be a utility cabinet with maybe chemicals in it, or with knives or screwdrivers or something that a person with Alzheimer's could injure themselves with. If you have sharp knives, steak knives, or again cutlery for the purpose of cutting meat, or bread knives and the like of this, those can pose a danger. Anything up high, so here my dad, when he was alive, installed these various shelving units and these hangers to hang pots, but again, with reduced mobility and also with the cognitive impairment, he might try and reach up something high. The chairs, there's a kitchen table in here, and the chairs your loved one might use as a climbing surface. I've seen my dad standing on top of a chair because he didn't want to go retrieve the stepladder or something, and that can be a hazard. So again, restricting access can be key, but also just watching. If your loved one is in a state where he or she is in danger of getting into a lot of things, and you have reservations about being able to control a room or a portion of the house, or an area in a room sufficiently, then it may indicate that is time to segue your loved one into a different environment, or at least to secure full-time supervision or care for him or her in their own house or in some other setting. Again, underneath, very common, you're going to see things like Drano and cleansers, bleach and the like of this might be under here. Very dangerous chemicals. They can cause burns. They can cause damage to the eyes, to the skin. They can be fatal or injurious if digested or ingested. And again, just sort of surveying the landscape from the point of view of what could my loved one get into. In a future video, I will go into some of the ways in which cabinet locks can be installed, drawer locks can be installed, the microwave can be secure. Let's say a refrigerator lock, an oven lock is sometimes utilized. Maybe put up a gate. You got to be careful with the gate. It might keep a child out, maybe not. But for an older person, if they try and scale the gate, they could fall and hurt themselves. Tricky. This is really tricky. But in a future video, we'll kind of go into some of the solutions. And this is just the kitchen, one room of the house. I will work my way through the house, sort of surveying what the dangers might be. Now, those were some of the more obvious dangers that the kitchen poses, but there are a few that are a little bit less obvious, and some that are idiosyncratic for people with Alzheimer's disease. In that latter category, just to get that one out of the way, my dad actually, when we secured all of the cleaning chemicals, he opened a bag of sugar and was trying to scour, quote unquote, scour the floor in his explanation, because he couldn't do it any other way. So it was one that was really odd to behold, since I don't think I ever would have predicted that he would have opened a bag of sugar and dumped it on the floor on purpose in order to clean the tiles, but that's what he did. So just things that you may notice you may have to deal with on the fly. That could have been a hazard for slipping on the floor, and just who knows? God knows, he could have scooped it all back up and put it in the bag, and we probably wouldn't have noticed, So just odd things like that. But some more that are a little bit more straightforward, even though they're a little bit less obvious maybe than some of the ones we already canvassed, are as follows. So we spoke a little bit about the danger of electrical shock and injury, the proximity to the water. But another one would be just overloaded circuits. My dad would bring in power strips and other adapters, and you would see multiple things just plugged into a single outlet. So you want to make sure the electricity is carefully monitored and controlled, and if possible, access to those outlets is restricted. We talked about the stovetop, the microwave, of course, dangers from fires and burns, but there's also the danger of grease accumulation, and that can be on the stovetop, up in this case in the range hood, stovetop, and just a number of dangers that attend to those things. If you're coming into the house of a person who has had dementia for some time, my grandma lived by herself for many years, who knows what the status of things like that is. I mean, have they been cleaned? Have they been cleaned in a long time? It's not obvious. Be careful and attentive. Another interesting one would be rags, washcloths, sponges that have been improperly cleaned or that are used for multiple purposes. If my dad, for example, had used a washcloth, let's say, to clean up, spilled poultry juice from maybe some kind of a poultry container, and then all of a sudden had to put that rag back or put it up, maybe use the hand towel or something. Again, be mindful. You never know what a person with Alzheimer's disease or some cognitive impairment may be thinking, or what they may do. They might put something, even do it by accident. Make sure that the any cleaning supplies that are accessible to that person have been properly cleaned, and that you as a caretaker know that they've been cleaned before you use them for any serious cleaning task, or count on the fact that they've been properly disinfected and the like of that. Another danger that attends any water really is going to be the danger of mold. You want to make sure here along the sink, I don't know if you can see, but there are some, the caulking strip has not, the caulking strip around our sink here has not been redone in some time. So the splash guard, or the back behind the sink, water can get behind that. It could get under the cabinets. If pipes are in a state of disrepair, there could be water accumulated under the sink. So just check for those things. Number one, the water can be a slipping hazard, which we already sort of talked about. But number two, mold is a danger. Another one is narrow pathways. Because of the crowded nature of the kitchen here, there's a table. There are storage. There's not a whole lot of room to traverse in this environment. And so if that is similar to your or your loved one's environment, be mindful of the fact that being that their reflexes are not what they used to be, they're at a greater risk, and possibly some of their joint muscular deterioration, or whatever other conditions might attend their old age. Besides that, the cognitive impairment is going to make it difficult to just maneuver around many times. So make sure that the paths are cleared, and the kitchen is no different. In fact, with hard corners, shelves, glassware, cutlery, a trip and a fall in this case could be even worse than another room of the house if they fall on a hot stovetop or God knows what. So just keep the paths clean and clear. Again, we spoke about raw meat, handling the raw meat, cleaning up after the raw meat, properly cooking the raw meat, properly storing it, just in the freezer. If somebody were to take a package of meat, we used to have popsicles and things stored in the refrigerator, or excuse me, in the freezer. Well, if my dad had taken a package of meat and set it near the popsicles, and then somebody had, one of these popsicles where you just cut the end off and sort of take it, if there's raw meat juice on that popsicle, again, a person may not know until they experience some kind of digestional distress or something else. So it's a very big issue. I think the fact that a person who's cognitively impaired has access to raw meat, milk, perishable food items that have to be very carefully cooked and handled and stored. So just take extra care in the kitchen. So just kind of as a summary, and again, I'm going to go into greater depth in a further video on actual procedures for making the kitchen safer, but just in general, non-skid pads, locks on cabinets, latches on things like the oven, maybe a lock or a latch on the refrigerator door, possibly locking the microwave cabinet itself, or at least utilizing some kind of a locking code to prevent the microwave from being operated. Another option, and one that I've already mentioned and I just love it, are these locks that get placed on the end of electrical cords. I'm going to show you those, and I'm going to feature them in a video that I'm scripting presently on just some of the inexpensive things that you can get to help with minimal effort, to help do a lot of good in the house in terms of some of the Alzheimer's proofing that's necessary. Another just standard safety thing would be make sure that there is a working smoke detector in close proximity to the kitchen. Not a bad idea to have CO sensors as well. They tell you smoke rises, so it should be up high, and in some cases you read that CO sensors should be placed low. If you have a lower level, that's often where they are, but just for safe measure, I would tell you, for me, to scatter them around the house, CO sensor close to, my dad, for example, one time in loading the dishwasher, I think he carelessly left a plastic something or other, spoon, let's say, that fell down to the heating element in the dishwasher. So after it had gone through the wash cycle and was drying, the heating element melted the plastic, which set off the CO2 sensors, so it released CO2 into the air, or excuse me, CO, carbon monoxide, not carbon dioxide. And thankfully it was detectable by the CO sensor, but that could pose a severe risk to health, and there's a risk of death with CO gas exposure. There's also natural gas detectors. Sometimes they are in combination with a smoke or a CO sensor. It's not a bad idea, I think, to have one of those in close proximity if you have appliances that are natural gas powered. So in this case here we have an electric stove, but previously it was gas. So if you have a gas stove, not a bad idea to have a natural gas sensor somewhere close to detect anything that may be off about that. Now I would say again, if your loved one is living by him or herself, you might want to look into having a monitored security system. Possibly some of those sensors can be wired in, because the loved one may not be counted on to react appropriately to an alarm, to get to safe a place, to get to fresh air or whatnot. But certainly if they're at that point, I would hope that you are monitoring them closely, or that somebody is. Finally, a fire extinguisher is a great item to have in a kitchen. Again, with the fire dangers and things like that, a working fire extinguisher. It can't be something that you're going to depend on your loved one to be able to operate, I would say, but certainly for caretakers, they want to have access to that. And again, access control. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in further videos. Another consideration is placing of inappropriate items in inappropriate places. So for instance, my dad, I mentioned, placed a glass bowl on top of a hot heating element on the stove, and the thing ruptured. Well, it's not uncommon for a person with a cognitive impairment to, let's say, mistakenly place, we have a set of drawers, let's say, under this microwave. Right. And it wouldn't be unheard of for a person with Alzheimer's disease to open up the microwave by accident and put something inside of the microwave that was intended to go into the drawer, or put something into the oven. And if the item is small enough, it might not be noticed. Plastics and things might release chemicals and vapors that could contaminate food. They could cause a fire. They could cause, the inhalation of noxious gases or other chemicals. And so it's imperative to try to survey the landscape to make again, a latch on the door of the oven can prevent some access to it. But if the latch is defeated, or if the latch allows, which typically they do, they allow the thing to be open slightly, it still may be possible to shove an item inside of the oven. So it would be a good idea just to do a safety check if you are preparing food and need to use the oven for your loved one. Just make sure that there's nothing inside. It's a similar mentality to dealing with children. It's a similar mentality to dealing with young children. You have to sort of baby-proof, or as I'm saying, basically Alzheimer's-proof the environment, because the person with a cognitive impairment cannot be counted on to appropriately interact with his or her environment. Another consideration that applies in our particular situation here, you see we have a water filter or water purification system, so you want to make sure that a person who's got a cognitive impairment is utilizing that correctly. They're not putting the unpurified water into the purification area. I'm going to go into greater detail of that in a future video. If you found something of use, I invite you to like the video and please subscribe to the channel. I intend again to do an entire series just on Alzheimer's proofing the home environment, and we're going to start to get into some of that shortly. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon.